All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole with Ray and Dan. I'm Dan,
I'm Ray.
and
I'm
with
Jem.
us, and this is said Sem. Welcome, Sem. Tell us a little bit about yourself and StarQuiz.
Yeah, I'm Jem. I'm the founder of StarQuiz. We're an AI assessment platform for the next generation of learning. And our purpose is really to get as much assessment done and as much insight out of assessments as possible so that school administration, teacher, and even business administration decisions are made on the best data possible.
Okay. Who's your primary target client?
Yeah, it's definitely schools, higher education, and K-12 schools are our primary target. Um, in that system, we kind of go for public schools, charter schools, and we work with international schools and schools abroad as well.
Okay. So
Yep.
when you're working with the type of assessments, obviously are going to be different for say K through 12 or like a charter or like a Montessori versus higher education, your colleges, your universities. Do you guys have a different methodology for the levels, or is it
Yeah,
just
that's
in the yeah?
so as far as types of questions, really from middle school on to higher ed, we have this like the building blocks, which are multiple choice questions, connect the dot questions, open response questions. As far as making different assessments, a lot of assessment actually boils down to a very simple thing. The big problem with assessment is creating the right assessments themselves as far as questions and difficulty and cognitive complexity goes. And then what you do with that assessment, how long it takes to get the insight, and what insights can you derive from it. So we really automate the first and the third process. And then as far as like what kind of assessments we want to give, it's just the standard type. And the one thing that's different for K-12 is we tie the assessments to standards. So you can see what part of the curriculum it attaches to. And in the case of like business, when you're going through, some ISO certification or compliance certification as a team, we can identify which parts of the certification are understood and which are not. So that's sort of what we do.
Okay. So in doing that with the younger group, the K through 12, like uh, in Pennsylvania, for example, the amount of money that public schools are given are sometimes tied directly to these assessments that the students. Because I remember my daughter when she was in high school, once a year, everybody was on high alert because they had these assessments that they had to take, and the teachers were like freaking out because their budget relied heavily on these scores being as high as possible. Do you guys take
Right.
that into consideration for these schools, or do they influence your assessments based on like budgetary concerns?
Yeah. So I'll kind of explain this in a detailed way because
Yeah.
there's a lot to digress on there. But generally, and this changes per state, per county, but generally, the worse a school's doing, the more funding they get. That's why the United States has some of the highest spend per student. Um, as far as uh, you know, the anxiety around an assessment like that, both from the student side and the teacher side, is because assessments as a whole get broken down into two categories, which are summative assessments and formative assessments. What you're talking about is as summative as an assessment can get, and summative means it's just at the summation of a given period. So it's at the end of a unit, at the end of a year. Uh, it's an exam that's given once, and it's supposed to gather all the data. Uh, every state has their own version of this, but you can look at midterms and final exams as summative exams as well, because they're basically only being like students only get assessed once the learning of that topic is finished. What we really focus on is a mechanism in which we can predict and analyze our way to a summative assessment by giving more assessments beforehand. So what we do is formative assessment, and that means during the formative times of learning. When we're learning a new concept, as soon as possible, we want to evaluate not just what the individual understood, but what given individuals in a class or a company understand about. And that way, as soon as, if we can identify the learning gap as soon as possible, then we can address it as soon as possible, and we can prevent problems from occurring rather than intervening with them later. The entire US education system really glorifies formative assessment while uh, it pretty much only does summative assessments. A lot of formative assessments are informal, and that's why they're hard to track. And because they're hard to track, they're often correlated with not a lot of outcomes. But when you look at it in any research done on assessment, formative assessment always causes higher summative assessment scores. And in our case studies, that's also proven time and time again, where a class that's being given 30% more assessment and getting insights from that never does worse than a class that just has 4 exams, for example. And I think when it comes to funding, yeah, there's that inverse relationship where you could be a great school and you're gonna get funding for it, or you can be a really, really bad school and you're gonna get funding for it. And yeah, there's a whole problem with the public education system in that regard too, I think.
That's fair enough. That's very fair enough. Okay. Um,
Is that one of the reasons that, you got into this? Like how tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in 2023, I
great
was a
question.
college student at UC Santa Cruz. And my brother and our first co-founder basically started a company without me, which was one of the first AI tools that were given to students as far as helping with homework. It was called Huxley AI. And one of the components of Huxley was a tool called Lecture to Notes, which would record a lecture being given on the student's laptop and create quizzes for study afterwards. Um, what happened over time with Huxley was growing by itself. It got to around 500,000 users. So it was going really well for us. But something interesting was that teachers started using Huxley, where we were only targeting students to use the tool. It was a really interesting phenomenon to see at a time when AI was just controversial in education. So we interviewed a lot of those teachers that were using it, and they basically explained this system to us, saying, we want to do formative assessments. It's really difficult and time consuming to create questions. It would be really cool if this could grade questions. It would be really cool if I could track my students with it. And basically, we co-developed it with those teachers. And it came out to be a system that an entire school district can track every single student's mastery basically throughout the year and know exactly what's going to happen when they come to one of those big exams.
to the point that it's predictive.
Well, in practice, you're basically getting so much real-time insight that compared to not doing it, you're basically going blind without doing these formative assessments.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it requires intuition, of course. I mean, it requires professional administrators to make professional decisions. But after all, the job of a school administrator is twofold. One, it's definitely, and this is underscored a lot, like passed on a lot, this aspect of the job, but school administrators are administrators of people. They have to administrate and take care of teachers, how the well-being of teachers, thus the well-being of the students, all the facilities. It's a really human-oriented job. But on top of that, they're the ones that are responsible for, student success. And on that side, educational data today runs from the classroom to the top in a very disorganized, slow, and just inefficient way. And we're really battling that. We're a solution to that problem completely, where an administrator can know and rest assured that all the activity, academic activity that's going on is not going to be a surprise 4 months down the line when budgets are concerned, when, the amount of enrollment is concerned. You can basically use this to guarantee a lot of things that are going to come later on, whether you do it or not.
So, do you guys? I guess in reverse, are you guys tracking the different types of schools or specific schools kind of doing like a before and after, like before StarQuiz and after StarQuiz.
Yeah, so we've been able to make case studies on the class level with basically partner teachers that we have. We're seeking the opportunity to do a class, like a district-wide assessment there, basically. It's going to take some time for us. Hopefully in the next year, year and a half, we can find the correct partners to do something like that with. And yeah, it's definitely in our pipeline. It's something that we're very confident would go very well.
I mean, that's the feedback, basically, right? Is it working?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, do you see, so for example, like a Propel school or a Montessori, or I guess the third would be like a public school. Do you see a significant difference between schools that maybe had a more stringent assessment system in place, maybe not utilizing AI, like a Montessori, versus an old school, no pun intended, old school public school way of assessing? Like when I was a kid, we had the CAT tests, the California Achievement Test, which
Yep.
we pencil whipped those things. We just didn't care, right?
Yep.
Now
Yep.
people care.
Well, arguably the students, who knows, but they're important now for schools. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So, I guess there was a couple parts to what you said, but as far as
Yeah.
a Montessori school, you can kind of put like education itself, if we were to break it down to its basic components, it's, someone teaching and a group of people learning from that teacher. Uh, Montessori, basically, if we put that on one end of the spectrum and then take a large lecture hall on the other hand,
Okay.
the main difference is, one's very interactive, but very low on lecture, very group activity heavy, but not so heavy on the individual work. The other component is, very, very information heavy, very, let me just give you all the information in 50 minutes, 2 hours, and you do all the work individually. Now, there's, proponents of both systems. Both systems have, there's a give and take. With Montessori, basically, you have the risk that you're going to group students together that both don't know the subject, right? And because everyone's getting less lecture, they're really getting less information input, would argue the other side. And then for the others, for the large lecture halls, you're getting, almost no student engagement, almost no active learning. You have no way of finding out who understands what. I'd say our solution is definitely more for the public education, traditional education, and as a solution to the problems there. Because with Montessori, you're actually talking about a continuous real life assessment of every student all the time.
Right.
So they don't really have that issue. If anything, they have the issue of more knowledge transfer. Whereas the problem we're really getting at with public education is with AI, you really don't have to, make these activities literally one-on-one with the student because you have an intelligence there that can aid in that, automate that process for a teacher. So if you're talking about a professor and they have a fork in the road where they can make a decision that they can say, I'm going to teach my class for an hour and a half, and I'm going to give a piece of homework or an assignment, and in a couple weeks, I'm going to get the assignment back from the students, and we'll find out what they learned that day. Or they can give one assessment that's created from their lecture, if they want, from the actual voice of their lecture, or from the materials of their lecture, or a mix of those, or just describing the quiz they want specifically. They create an assessment from that, give it to all 200 students, and find out, A, who understands what in this class. Out of these 7 topics I talked about, which the AI extrapolates from whatever input you give, these 7 topics that are in this quiz, how much of it was understood from the general class? Which students stood out as far as understanding or not understanding specific topics that go against the trend of what I talked about? Which essentially means I can look as a teacher and say, I was able to not describe this thing correctly because 90% of my students just didn't understand this. Whereas a lot of these topics did well, but Jeremy didn't get that. Alice didn't understand this part. And so now when a student comes to you and has an issue about what they're learning, you can actually specifically talk about their learning gaps rather than assumptions about what you think they know.
You actually just answered my next question was, do you see this being able to individualize a learning plan for a particular student, taking like a global set of information and actually drilling it down to that individual to say, you know what, Jeremy here learns better by getting the information this way, where Susie learns better by getting it that way, right? Because like it's kind of like the difference between, if I'm teaching somebody rocket science, I can say, here, read chapters 10 through 20, and there's going to be a quiz on it, versus, all right, let's everybody get together and we're going to build a rocket and we're going to learn the process start to finish by doing, right? Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. The only part where I say we don't really get into that is we can't really come into a school and change their mode of teaching, right? So the whatever a K-12 classroom is, like whatever happens in AI, and this is a sincere belief of mine, whatever happens in AI, I don't know what's going to happen with higher education going forward, maybe in the next 20, 30 years. Really, who knows? The value of higher education is, a lot of higher education is in an existential questioning of itself. I'll put it that way. From you know, our interactions with schools, to, what is said on the news from the schools themselves. You can really feel this the last couple of years. But
Definitely.
K-12 education, I think, is gonna not change in a drastic physical way. What I think is gonna happen is it's inevitable that AI is gonna basically automate and make more efficient the academic aspect of things. You can see this abroad, but America's also doing a really good job of trying to force itself to, adopt AI across the board. It's really a stark change over the last 2 years, which is how long, I've been in the AI and education space. 2, 3 years. It was like a complete taboo to now the next best thing for everybody. And that's really great to see. But as far as what's going to happen in a school, I think teachers are going to be there more and more socially and emotionally for students. And they'll be able to teach their academics, but not have to make that the main concern. The ideal situation we want to see is schools are a place where a student goes in, gets incredible knowledge through curiosity and actual investigation in the things that they're curious on, while growing to become better individuals and ultimately make a great society that way. That's the whole point of education. Arguably, a lot of time today is, has to be spent guessing, doing paperwork, and just getting ready for the thing, And when teachers have in the middle school setting or the high school setting, a lot of young students with a lot of energy that don't know really how to focus that energy on what, you don't want to spend time actually doing a lot of rote tasks as a teacher.
So,
So,
Jem,
so is that
you
to
said,
say? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, Jem.
No, it's okay.
Jem, you said that you've made advances in the last 2 or 3 years compared to where you were, in the beginning. You've made some advances. What do you think your hurdles are? What is your next hurdle? What is your next roadblock?
For StarQuiz,
Mhm. What do you
yeah,
think's what do you think's gonna be your next big hurdle? First, it was the acceptance, right? We're starting to move towards the acceptance. AI isn't
mhm,
what is it from Terminator, Dan?
Skynet.
Yeah, AI is not Skynet anymore. People thought
right.
AI was Skynet. Arnold's coming right behind me. Where's your next hurdle? From it came, it's here. What do you think your next hurdle is going to be over the next couple of years, if any?
I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think our challenge is going to be not just the challenge of, ed tech companies like us, but just the challenge of every single school in America too, which is the process of actually picking the right tool is too difficult for everybody and moves really, really slow compared to, you know, not just other industries, but there is a part of me that kind of sees K-12 being more and more behind as technology gets faster and faster and faster, which means there might be a tipping point where basically what happened with COVID is like, do you open the floodgates and just fund a lot of schools with a lot of money and then turn that tap out really quick when that money's out, 2 or 3 years down the line? Or are we going to make plans for the next 20, 30 years that ensure, whatever's done today is a foundation for what's going to be done tomorrow? And I think what we need to do as a sector is refocus on, you know, the most important problem and the elephant in the room, which is American mastery of like American students are just doing worse and worse every year. Math scores on the floor, literary scores on the floor, civics on the floor. I mean, it's really a big worry when AI is automating so many tasks for people while students are learning less and less. And we want to counter that. We want to I don't think AI is the problem here because this has obviously been going on for a long time. AI is a new material where we can throw it into the mix and find solutions that are novel and haven't been able to be done before. What you call formative assessment is a theory that's been around since the 1980s, probably even longer, but coined in the 1980s. But it's just never been a part of public education, really, because to make formative assessments and grade them and extrapolate information, understand what you taught incorrectly, understand what every single student gets wrong, is a really difficult and time-consuming thing for teachers to do. And teachers are already underpaid and overworked and busy. So it has to be automated. There's no other solution. There's no other solution. And there's a lot of other things in education like that, from the administration to the students to the teachers. But I think our main issue is that there's a lot of hype around AI, but not a lot of focus on what would we have solved before AI came along. What would we have focused on? What issues did we have? And what did we need funding for to get done correctly? Where a lot of these are now switched off and everyone wants to buy AI. And even though that works for us, I think it's the wrong focus. And I think the industry needs to get itself together in that regard.
That's a that interesting and surprising take. Now, do you see AI being more of the backbone of the future of education, or still more of a tool?
Well, I mean,
Or
the
is it
amount
both?
of data, yeah, I mean, the amount of data that is already being produced in a class but not being collected. Think about that. Like,
Yeah.
how many moments while a lecture is being given are students hearing something and forgetting about it? And if you took look at that on an individual basis, literally thousands of moments are created but not used. There's that old saying, words fly but paper always stays, or whatever. Written word always stays. So
Right.
use AI to just get data. Make that in a safe and secure way. That's not what we do today, but I think that's where the future of education is going to be. There's no reason someone should learn something and not have what they learned in that physical life assessed the way they learned it, if that makes sense. I think that's the ideal situation in the future there. And as far as tools in class, you'll always have AI tools. One day, maybe ChatGPT or Gemini will do all of it. Maybe it'll be thousands of little companies. But that's not even the question. What's more coming is, agents and coding with agents, being able to create things with agents. That's something that is going to be wholly accessible to everybody, right? So you have a world today, since the early 2000s, since Web 2, where education purchases have, you have vendors, and then the vendors come to the school, they court the school buys that vendor, and then, either that's a 10-year license or a 1-year license or a 5-year license, but something's locked in and the school uses that tool now. there's a lot of interesting ideas now going around schools where schools could be making their own tools for themselves. But having that system connect to their general workflow is just going to be, I don't know, agents, infrastructure, AI tools, all of these are going to be like, they're just becoming sort of something that needs a lot of clarity and a clear roadmap to navigate. If a school doesn't have what they want clarified in their minds, they're going to have a lot of problems and a lot of bad purchases made along the way.
Right. And potentially wasted budgetary money that wasn't utilized
Think
correctly.
about how much the education system potentially is wasted in the last 20 years if today the circumstances we're in are the way they are.
Right.
And really, if you look at it, administrators aren't happy, teachers aren't happy, students and parents aren't happy. So I think, I'm very, very hopeful, and I know that the type of work doing is the type of work that's fixing the problems here. And I'm actually very hopeful that it's all going to turn out well. I just think the speed has to be caught up. Like,
Right.
decision making, moving forward, and having a clear roadmap is the most important thing for every single school district in America.
So you made a very interesting point earlier. I actually come from a family of teachers. My mother, three of my aunts, two of my uncles were all educators. My grandfather was actually a K through 12 principal. Pretty much his entire life. You made the point that AI. Do you think that AI is going to take some of the pressure off of the teacher and help them to be more empathetic to the students' needs, and utilizing AI to maybe take some of the pressure of having to grade tests constantly, give them more time to actually be more student focused?
Hey, Dan, if you can hear me, you're going to have to re-ask that question because you broke up big time. Matter of fact, you're frozen right now. Just hold tight, Jem.
You're both,
We're having some technical
you're both cutting
difficulties.
off a little.
We're having some technical difficulties. The internet is unstable. Jem, can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
can
even
hear
realize that.
We're
Is
having
it still that way?
technical difficulties. Yeah. We can hear you now. Try that question again, because you got about 3 words in and you were done, right, Jem?
Yeah,
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So my question was, do you see AI taking some of the pressure off of teachers and allowing them to be more student focused, maybe being a more empathetic towards the students' needs versus having to grade papers all night long and having to focus on these assessments that they in the past would have had to have done by hand, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing bad about what you just said. I think every teacher would love that. I've never really met a teacher that doesn't care about their students, really. It's a really rare thing to see. So, giving the teacher an opportunity and the time and the space to connect with students is something that's going to be possible with technologies like ours. And, like I said, I think the more that happens, the more the center of education is going to become that human interaction. The
Right.
more that you're going to put AI in there, the more that human interaction is going to have time and space to evolve between people. So, arguably, instead of like any time the student's going to be home is going to be a time, spent in technology anyways. That's
Right.
sort of definitely how it goes. So I feel like school's going to become more and more that place where every human learns how to socialize, how to make connections, how to get mentorship, how to, get lessons and then apply them. And assessments and things like that, I think, are going to serve their purpose while taking less time to do. And that's the important thing. If you used to spend 5 hours making one assessment and 6 hours or 10 hours grading it, now you're going to spend the same amount of time to make, 20 assessments, which, that's really, really good. That's really good. So
Right.
If a teacher made 20 assessments a month, I want to give them a high five. That's the type of teacher I like.
Well,
Nice.
one of the things that you said that really resonates is teachers are underpaid and overworked. And
Yeah,
this really puts the focus on that, on the positive side of just the, for no lack of a better term, the well-being of a teacher, right? They're not going to, there's not going to be burnout. There's not going to be that I don't give a crap attitude anymore, because you did say teachers get into teaching because they love to teach, they love to educate.
100%, 100%. And um, you know, it's really, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and there it's a research university. So professors, teaching isn't their main thing. But even they care. Even they want, they're gonna spend the time in that class as a part of their job, and every human being wants their time to be valuable and for other people to value their time. Like I said, like assessment isn't the whole answer, right? It's just one component of what we're talking about. But ultimately, it's a fact that teachers are in this situation. It's a fact that administrators aren't the ones causing this, but they're the ones being looked at for help, you know. And I'll give a really interesting situation, which is like earlier this year after the elections, and the Department of Education, semi shutting down and whatever. It was a really interesting time because, you can generalize that almost 90% of a school's costs generally are staff, are teachers, right? So the rest of the 10% or the 15% is your facilities, your field trips, your technology, your curriculum. Uh, you know, it's a really, really low percentage of the actual budgets of schools go to technology. Even though that's the case, so many all schools are all like schools seem to be understaffed. Every teacher is under incredible stress, and I don't think teachers are the ones to blame here because they have a really, really difficult job. You know, um, if a doctor messes up, one person gets you know affected by that. But if a teacher doesn't have the right tools, you have a basically a machine there that's producing a problem with tens or hundreds of students back to back to back, right? So no one really thinks that the place we are in American education and why the scores are so bad across the board or because of the last 2 3 years of what's been going on. Every child today ran into learning gaps when they were in third grade, and now they're in college and they're having trouble interpreting a text or doing basic math, so to speak. So these gaps form early on. I think the system that's necessary, uh, the ideal thing we should see is an end to end from the student all the way to the very top decision makers, where you're tracking students not once a year, not every 4 years doing an analysis, but you're getting an AI system that interprets and delivers that information every day an assessment is done. I mean, that's the vision I have for the future. And that's what I think is going to happen and needs to happen in order to take care of this problem at its core.
Catching and fixing problems before they happen.
At a big scale, yeah.
Right.
Because education decisions are made on those exams that you're talking about, right? Like
Right.
in California now it's called the CASP, in Texas it's called the STAR assessments. These are what is taken as data and you know interpreted to make the next educational sort of set of policies or funding decisions, etc.
Right.
So that being done in such a slow and inefficient way obviously can't have a good effect on the kids and parents that rely on that system.
Fair enough. Well, I think that's probably a good good place for us to stop. Before we do, though, I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Let our audience know how they can reach you, what your website is. So you're up.
Thank you. StarQuiz.ai, educators, education administrators. We'd love for you to come, try the product, get a demo with us, talk to us. We always love hearing from educators. You can join the many people that's using it and getting benefit from it. But other than that, if any part of this conversation was cool, we'd love to talk.
Absolutely. StarQuiz.ai.
Awesome. StarQuiz.ai.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was exceptionally interesting. I learned more about aspects of the assessments than I ever realized. And like you said, I think it makes perfect sense that the more it can be done early, the better education is going to be in the future.
I love it.
Go
I
AI.
love it. That's my best. Thanks for getting it. No, I
Thank you
really
so much.
appreciate it, guys. This was really fun. Appreciate you. Yes, sir.
Have a great
Take
night.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.